The evening air felt soft as I walked into the open field, the same place I often visited to calm my mind. My mother was no longer here, my father was old, and the burden of the promise weighed on my shoulders more heavily than anyone else realized. I had been praying, asking God whether the future He had planned for me would ever become clear. As the sun set, I lifted my gaze and noticed a line of figures coming from the horizon. At first, they looked like a mirage, the kind people imagine when their hearts grow weary. But then I recognized the gate. It was my servant returning from the long journey we had trusted God to guide. My breath caught when I saw her. She sat on the camel with a grace I could not explain, as if she had stepped out of a prayer I never dared speak aloud. When she saw me, she lowered her veil, and that single gesture told me she honored God, she honored herself, and she embraced whatever future awaited both of us. The servant's eyes met mine, filled with the certainty of someone who had witnessed a miracle. As she stepped down and walked over, something inside me felt as if the ache I had carried since my mother's death finally eased. I reached out my hand, and in the quiet of that moment, I knew God had brought her to me, just perfectly as He had promised. She walked toward me with steady steps, the soft fluttering in the air, and I felt the world shrink. There was nothing but her calm presence drawing near to me. I could sense the strength in her and the gentleness in her eyes even through the veil. When she stood before me, neither of us spoke at first. There was no need. It felt as if our paths had been running toward this moment long before we were born. The servant began to tell everything. At the well, his voice full of gratitude and hid, but I barely heard him. I watched her lower her gaze with humility, and then raise it again with a sense of courage, and it felt like dawn rising after a long night. I guided her toward my mother's tent, a place still heavy with memory and silence. As Rebekah stepped inside, the air seemed to shift. She moved with a grace that did not erase the past, but softened its ache. For the first time since my mother's passing, I felt comfort. Coming to a place I thought would always feel empty, I realized then that God had not only answered a need for a companion, but had restored something inside me that grief had taken. Standing there beside her, I understood why the servant had bowed to the ground in gratitude. This was not chance. This was the quiet work of God weaving two lives together at precisely the right moment.